Okay, it's in my talking points that somebody sent me. Aren't those nice? Is that for Maria?
Not all of them are transportation. So we're going to allow everybody 3 minutes. Where's my agenda? There it is. Okay, thank you. All right. You ready? You all ready? I call to order the September 16th, 2019 business meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Education. We welcome everyone and request everyone in the audience to please silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Present.
Ms. Bolton?
Present.
Mrs. Bowers?
Present.
Mr. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Messer?
Present.
Mr. Borowski? President Jones?
Here. Thank you. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting August 26, 2019, special meeting August 26, 2019, regular meeting September 4th, 2019, and special meeting September 4th, 2019. I need a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved as presented. Ms. Bolton, as Chair of the Finance Committee, please present the August 28, 2019 Audit Committee meeting report.
Thank you. I certainly will. Once again, we had a full house for our Community Audit Committee meeting, and again began to review a number of things, particularly the efforts of Kevin Vaughn, Plattenberg and Associates, who informed the committee about Plattenberg's audit of internal controls over financial reporting and compliance. The audit is due to the state auditor by midnight, December 31st, 2019. We also got briefed regarding new government accounting standards requirements. And also, I want to point out as well, the internal audit plan and goals was presented by our own internal auditor, and with some changes and recommendations, it was approved and will be conducted by her to live through this school year and fiscal year. Also, we talked a little bit about the transportation issues and the audit that took place over last year regarding transportation, and also made sure that she was aware of it probably was a higher priority to look at the overall picture rather than what she had initially planned, which was to look at the dedicated buses. And so I think that was useful, and I think the audit committee agreed with that. The audit committee member, Thomas Hellman, made a motion to approve the internal audit plan and goals as presented, and it would be presented to us. Also, the treasurer presented the financial monthly sorts of documents that Finance Committee sees and this board sees on a monthly basis, as well as a discussion too about the importance of following the preschool promise expansion and changes. And finally, the treasurer was able to tell us, and I think it was very useful for the audit committee and everybody as she looked through the strategic plan, and I think this is a good practice for us all, to look at those things that are in the strategic plan that specifically deal with some of the issues that the audit committee is most interested in and most responsible for. And I think that kind of parceling out and reviewing and focusing in by everybody will, I think, keep the strategic plan in full implementation mode. So I submit this as written and hope for approval. And again, thank the audit committee members for their very diligent service.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. The committee report has been motioned to approve. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved as presented.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a pretty full agenda tonight, like three, I think the superintendent's going to introduce 3 presentations, and then under board matters, we have another one. So, superintendent.
There we go. So yes, we have 3 very exciting presentations, and we're going to start off with a celebration. And so I'm going to ask our Chief Communications Officer, Lauren Worley, to come forward to present our first presentation.
Thank you, Superintendent Mitchell and board. And as I make some opening remarks, I'm going to invite Marie Kobayashi and her family. I think they voted and agreed to come down. Yes? Okay. They took a vote. It is a democracy here.
We're going to present the resolution, and then we're going to ask Mr. Howe.
Today, Cincinnati Public Schools begins its celebration of National Hispanic Heritage Month. We're celebrating the history, contributions, culture, and legacy of American citizens whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central South America. Today, we are celebrating one of our colleagues who makes a difference in the lives of our Hispanic and Latinx students and staff, Marie Kobayashi. I'd like to introduce Commissioner Anthony Sims Howe from the Ohio Latino Affairs Commission to tell you all why we're here today. Commissioner.
Thank you very much. On behalf of our Governor, Mike DeWayne, and the Ohio Commission on Latino Affairs, we send you greetings. All right. This is great. You'll be surprised, but it's okay. I want to, on behalf of our board and our superintendent, I'm going to make this presentation to Marie Kobayashi. And there's a surprise in for all of you all. Ready? Go. Las Escuelas Públicas de Cincinnati. Una resolución en reconocimiento a Mireya Marie Kobayashi, considerando que Mireya Marie Kobayashi, una psicóloga escolar y gerente de servicios estudiantiles del Distrito Escolar de la Ciudad de Cincinnati, fue reconocida recientemente por la Comisión de Asuntos Latinos de Ohio como hispana distinguida de Ohio en el año 2018. Considerando que la señora Kobayashi ha brindado asistencia a estudiantes en Cincinnati por más de 20 años como tutora académica, asistente de salud mental, terapeuta conductual, facilitadora de grupos de apoyo para padres, psicóloga escolar y más recientemente como gerente en el Departamento de Servicios Estudiantiles por Estudiantes de Idiomas Inglés. Y considerando que la señora Kobayashi obtuvo fondos para la traducción de 500 documentos que otros distritos de Ohio pueden ascender en línea. Y considerando que la señora Kobayashi y su equipo, junto con las escuelas de la ciudad de Princeton, el Centro de Servicios Educativos del Condado de Hamilton y Universidad de Xavier administró exitosamente la subvención educativa denominada Straight A del Departamento de Educación de Ohio para apoyar el programa de futuras clases, sistema de apoyo cultural y lingüísticamente apropiadas, que proporcionó un mayor apoyo académico y lingüístico para estudiantes del idioma inglés, ELL por sus siglas en inglés, sus familias a través de medidas rentables y sostenibles. Y considerando que los resultados del programa Futuro Class bajo el liderazgo de la señora Kobayashi han sido reconocidos por el Departamento de Educación de Ohio y reproducidos por otros distritos escolares del estado y en el país. Y considerando que la señora Kobayashi ha trabajado en estrecha colaboración con administradores, maestros, familiares, líderes de la comunidad y organización para apoyar y defender a estudiantes y familiares inmigrantes en Cincinnati. Y considerando que la señora Kobayashi ha prestado servicio en las juntas de las funciones English Language Learner Foundation y Live Language Fundaciones, y considerando que en el año 2016 la señora Kobayashi fue reconocida por la organización Santa María Community Service por su servicio a la población inmigrante del área metropolitana de Cincinnati. En el año 2017, por la Cumbre de Educación Latina de Ohio, en inglés, Ohio Latin Education Summit, como ganadora del premio Defensora de la Educación, Education Advocate Award. Ahora, por cuanto resolve en reconocimiento del Mes Nacional de Herencia Hispana, la Junta de Educación honra y felicita a Mireja María Kobayashi por sus importantes contribuciones a los estudiantes familiares de la Escuela Pública de Cincinnati, firmada por Carolyn Jones, presidente, Ryan Messer, vicepresidente, Melanie Bass, Eve Bolton, Pamela Bowen, Ozzie Davis y Mike Morosky. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, on Mr. Messer, Vice President Messer, will present the resolution in English on behalf of the board. Mr. Messer?
A resolution recognizing Marie Kobayashi, whereas Marie Kobayashi, a school psychologist and student services manager for Cincinnati Public School District, was recently recognized by the Ohio Latino Affairs Commission as a Distinguished Hispanic Ohioan for 2018. And
Whereas Ms. Kobayashi has served students in Cincinnati for more than 20 years as an academic tutor, mental health assistant, behavior therapist, parent support group facilitator, school psychologist, and most recently as a manager in the Department of Student Services for English language learners. And whereas Ms. Kobayashi secured funding for the translation of 500 documents that districts across Ohio can access online. And
whereas Ms. Kobayashi and her team, together with Princeton City Schools, Hamilton County ESC, and Xavier University, successfully administered a straight A grant from the Ohio Department of Education to support the future of class, culturally and linguistically appropriate systems of support program, which provided greater academics and linguistic support for English language learners, ELLs, and their families through sustainable, cost-effective measures. And
whereas the results achieved in the Future Class program under Mrs. Kobayashi's leadership have been recognized by the Ohio Department of Education and replicated by school districts around the state and the country.
And whereas Ms. Kobayashi has worked closely with administrators, teachers, families, community leaders, and organizations to support and advocate for immigrant students and families in Cincinnati. And whereas Ms. Kobayashi has served on the boards of the English Language Learner Foundation and the Live a Language Foundation. And
whereas in 2016, Mrs. Kobayashi was recognized by Santa Maria Community Services for her service to the immigrant population within the greater Cincinnati area, and in 2017 by the Ohio Latino Education Summit as the Education Advocate Award winner. Now, therefore, be it resolved, in recognition of National Hispanic Heritage Month, the Board of Education honors and congratulates Marika Marie Kobayashi for her many important contributions to the students and families of Cincinnati Public Schools. On behalf of the Cincinnati Board of Education, Mr. Messer will present the resolution to Ms. Kobayashi. And Mr. Messer, would you please present it for a motion to approve the resolution?
Madam President, I present the resolution as written with hopes for adoption.
Thank you. Is there a second?
second.
Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Messer?
Aye.
Mr. Morosky, President Jones.
Aye. Congratulations, Ms. Kobayashi. Feel free to speak.
I just want to say a quick thank you so much to the board and for mi familia CPS. I feel so blessed to be able to do the work that I love and to do it with such wonderful people that support me every day. So I'm speechless. Thank you so much. Thank you, Commissioner Sims Howell. I just feel like I do my job and you all support me in that work, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I might ask, would you like to introduce your family? Please do.
Yes. My husband, Greg Lynch, and then this is Theodore Masahiro Lynch, and Eleanor
Hi.
Sophia Lynch.
Woo, yeah, all right. Thank you so much for coming, and again, congratulations.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you, Commissioner Sims Howell. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, moving on, Superintendent Mitchell, please introduce our next presentation.
Yes, we have two presentations that are directly related to the strategic plan. The first one is related to our goal that is centered around student-centered decision-making. I'm going to ask Deputy Superintendent Tiani Amat, along with Assistant Superintendent Susan Bunty, and Emily Campbell, who is our Director for Curriculum and Development, as well as our Director for Research and Evaluation, Connie Solano. So they're going to present to you an update to the report card, state report card, and also be able to give you some information in terms of the strategies that are being used to increase our academic achievement as related to the strategic plan and the report card.
Good evening.
Good evening.
It is an absolute pleasure to present to you around our student achievement goal, and we're going to open up our presentation with our call of action. And I'll just read it to you here. All Cincinnati Public School students are empowered through student choice, student decision-making, and meaningful learning experiences that prepare them to be community leaders and world influencers. That is our charge, and we are excited, and we know that the focus of today will be around student-centered decision-making. And simply put, we put students first. And in our strategic plan, it is clearly stated that we want to provide equitable opportunities for all of our students with unmatched experience, but most importantly, deliver results. And today's presentation is looking at only one tool that measures the academic results, and that's through our state report card. I'm here today with an awesome team, Connie Solano, our Director of Performance and Accountability. She will share the district-wide results, and then joining us is also Assistant Superintendent Susan Bunty, who will highlight individual school celebrations. And we know we have work to do that's outlined in our strategic plan, and our Director of Curriculum, Emily Campbell, will talk about that, and I will come back up and close. So thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, so first I just want to start off with an overview of the report card. The measures have not changed since last year. We still have 6 components that we are graded on. Achievement, there are 2 subcomponents, the performance index and also indicators met. There's also gap closing, which includes, it's the old AYP under No Child Left Behind. Now under ESSA, it's gap closing or AMO. And so it looks at subgroup performance in math, ELA, graduation, and then also a new subcomponent that came on board last year is progress on the OELPA. And that's how English learners take that test when they first come to the U.S. schools here in our school district. And then it looks to see how they've improved on those tests from one year to the next. So the subgroups that are accounted for are 10, and in the 2018-19 report card, you only needed 20 students in a subgroup to be accountable for them. 19-20 is going to be 15. So those subgroups are all kids are considered under one subgroup, are English learners, students who are economically disadvantaged, students who are on an IEP, and then there's 6 ethnic groups: African American, multiracial, white, Hispanic, Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander / Native Hawaiian, and American Indian / Alaskan Native. Then we have our K-3 literacy, and I highlighted 3rd grade reading guarantee because it's basically what % of our 3rd graders get promoted to 4th grade. In the 18-19 school year, we had 98% promoted. However, that percentage is not included in that component grade. It's just on the report card for information purposes only. K-3 literacy basically looks at students who were not on track in a previous time period, and then what % of them became on track in the next time period. We have progress, also known as value added. There are actually four subcomponents of progress, depending on whether or not you have those subgroups in your building or not. There's overall, there's gifted students, students with disabilities, and then students who fall in the lowest 20% of achievement across the state. Graduation rate, we have our 4-year rate and our 5-year rate. And one thing I wanted to mention again is that graduation rates are always in the rears. So for the 2018-19 report card, it's showing you the 4-year graduation rate for 2018, and it's showing you the 5-year graduation rate for 2017. And then finally, prepared for success. Prepared for success, basically you can earn points for receiving remediation-free scores on the ACT or SATs, receiving honors diploma or 12 industry credentials in the same field. And then once students do that, if they're able to do that, then they can get additional bonus points for receiving at least a 3 on 1 or more AP exams, and also earning 3 college credits. So I wanted to show a comparison between our 2016 overview of the report card versus 2019. And what I wanted to focus on is the fact that our gap closing grade has risen significantly. We are currently at a B in that component. And then also for our K-3 literacy, we also improved and have been maintaining a C. And the other point that I wanted to make, I know it's been made before, but prepare for success. Back in 2016, we did have a D, and we would have continued to show a passing rate, but then the state changed the scale for that particular component.
Excuse me, I don't know if anybody else is, but I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Oh.
That's okay. I'm sorry. Can
Is
we
this
turn it
better?
up?
No? Yes?
Okay, yes, thank you.
Did you want me to go back?
No, you're good, no.
Okay, all right. Did you want me to do this slide again, or are you
No.
good? Okay. So I wanted to point out some highlights of some upward trends in several areas. For example, 3rd grade reading. As you can see, we've gone from a 46.4% passing back in 2015-16, and on this last report card, we were at 66.4%. We also see a similar trend in our 4-year graduation rate and 5-year graduation rate. So for the class of 2015-16, we were at 72.8% graduated. And for the class of 2018, as I mentioned before, it's always a years in arrear for 4-year. We show 77.9% graduated. Our 5-year graduation rate has also increased. Gap closing, we've jumped from 16.9% in 2015-16 to 80.6% in 2018-19, earning us our B. K-3 literacy, we've gone from 12.3% to 39%, earning us a C. Our performance indexes also have been trending upward from 57% to 60.5%. And our prepared for success, as I mentioned before, in 2015-16, we did have a D, but as you notice, the percent for that component has steadily been increasing. But as a result of ODE changing the scale, it reflects differently on the report card. So a summary of the components and our, as far as how our schools have done on each of those components and overall, we had 14 schools improve in their overall grade. 32 of them increase in the overall points. So we get an overall point, and then based on that point, we'll determine what your letter grade is going to be. 32 of our schools actually showed an increase there. 18 schools increased their gap and also increased their, and another set of 18 increased their progress. So I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Bunty.
So we've not only seen progress at the district level, but many of our schools made significant progress as well. So on this particular slide, you can see all of those schools which we want to celebrate because they received an A in gap closing, which is extraordinarily significant. Walnut Hills, we want to point out the 3rd year in a row that they received that A grade. We also recognize schools that made progress and received an A. Carson and Evanston joined Roberts Academy, which also received an A for the third consecutive year. Many of you remember the presentation in which they were honored for that last year. And our K-3 literacy grade of an A, go Taft, for the second year that they earned that as well, along with a graduation grade of an A for Clark, SCPA, and Walnut. We also had 2 schools that earned an overall grade of an A, which is an outstanding accomplishment, Evanston and Walnut, and several who earned that grade of a B, which include Covedale, Dater, Montessori, Hyde Park, Kilgore, and Sands. And we also want to recognize the many schools across our district who earned an overall grade of a C, and those schools are delineated for you above. We know that although we're proud of the progress that our schools made this year, there is still much work to be done. And now to share our next steps going forward is Emily Campbell.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Although we're very excited about the improvements that we are making, we have a lot to do and want to make sure that students are at the center of those improvement projects. So this is our systems level key driver diagram, and what it does is aligns us back to our strategic goals under student-centered decision making, as well as the big conditions that we believe need to be in place in order for us to reach our goals. Activated students and families, strong instructional practices, safe and healthy culture for learning, on-grade level work, and data-informed decision-making for instruction. This is a visual of how all of that work manifests itself in our buildings. You will notice that our students are in the very center. They need to be a crucial part of what is going well and where we as educators can improve when we are trying to reach our outcomes. And the next slides show what are those big projects that we are investing our time and energy in a systematic way. So like Ms. Bunty shared, we have some really strong successes in our district, and we want to make sure that we are scaling and learning from one another. So we have 2 structures in place this year where we are bringing principals, resource coordinators, and teacher leaders where they can sit and have shared leadership experiences and share their stories across schools. And we also have a CPS leadership QI showcase where directors and principals can share some of their quality improvement work. We have invested in a K-12 ELA curriculum this year where that meet our must-haves. They were all green on the ED reports. They have award-winning books, historically and scientifically accurate, so our students can see themselves and other cultures within their curriculum. And both are built so that they are flexible for our experienced and complete enough for our novice teachers. We hope to and are working on an adoption cycle for a K-12 math curriculum in our upcoming 2021 school year. We also have invested in a Microsoft pathway for our middle school students who can earn 4 credentials by the end of their 9th grade year. And this course is built on more than just tech skills. It is built on a way in which students can speak and listen and read and write around problems that they are working to solve. And then we also want to know how our students are doing throughout the year so that we can incorporate additional remediation, practice, and enrichment activities to ensure academic growth. And finally, I want to highlight we have learned from our K-3 literacy improvement that having specialists in the field who can work with our students and accelerate learning is a powerful way to help our students get back on grade level. And so we have expanded our reading and math specialists to our reading specialists to help our 4-6 students as well as our 7-12 students who need reading, and we have also expanded it to math specialists so that we can accelerate the learning there.
I wanted to pull this slide up again. It demonstrates improvement, but more importantly, it's telling us what we're doing is working. Our superintendent opened this year's speech around no more new initiatives. We know it's working. It's hard to see in such a large urban district, so you see across from 3 years the improvement we have made. And we want to acknowledge the hard work of first our principals and our teachers. Teachers are the #1 impact on student achievement across the board. It does not matter what background a student is from, they matter. They can make a difference. And we also know that principals are the #1 impact on teachers. And our principals and our teachers work together in helping improve achievement for all students. They were willing to try new initiatives like quality improvement, gather data, run charts to help make informed decisions, and so we're scaling that process this year. We are really promoting shared decision-making. It's not one individual who has a good idea. It's our teams of teachers, administrators, resource coordinators, social workers, all coming together to work on behalf of students. Last year, we also had several principals participate in a principal QI intra-year training. Through this process, we learned that our principals needed more support and coaching. So we thank you for supporting the role of our directors of school leaders. So we did some reorganization this year, and that's what this little pamphlet here is, the teaching and learning restructuring of how we're supporting principals, teachers, and at the end of the day to get results for our students. This wonderful team, and we go by the 4x4 because it's made up of the 4 directors, director of curriculum, performance and accountability, testing, and early childhood. We went to a presentation with the great city schools this past summer. We are just excited to learn from other urbans across the nation and share our ideas. So in October, we were asked to come out and talk to a panel, talk from a panel to other urban schools. While we were there, they gave us this button, and we collected it and said, this is all about the board. Equity is a verb. So that jump in AMO was really the vision early on, years ago, around equity. It was the policies, it was the support of SAC in helping create a process around developing and adopting grade level appropriate curriculum. So we want to acknowledge that work. We are so excited about the strategic plan. We know we have a lot more to do. We are up for the challenge, and we just thank you for your support. At this time, we will take any questions. But before I leave, I just remembered, part of that equity work, and you have an envelope there, it was around the work we did in the fine arts. And all the research shows that students that are exposed to the fine arts, there will be a positive impact on the academics. And so we have an awesome celebration, a CPS International Jazz Festival coming up on October 5th, and you have 2 comp tickets there, so I hope you will join us, and it's led by our very own Dr. Izzy. So hope to see you at that concert, and it definitely takes a village, and we just thank you for the partnership. Any questions?
Thank you. Do board members have questions or comments? Mr. Messer, followed by Ms. Bowers.
First, thank you for the overview in what could have been about a 4 or 5 hour dialogue, getting deeper into these scores. You know, I think I probably share the common sentiment across this board that we're excited about the progress, but we are passionate about continuing to push it forward. And you know, I am thinking about what we saw here is it's easy to say, well, it's stacked against us and rich school districts perform better than poor school districts, when we actually have some examples of some schools that may not be some rich kids showing up at an A. And so I guess my question is, I think this is it's always a good time to kind of review that, but are we doing some things? And it's, that Evanston Academy is one that sticks out. Like, are we doing benchmarking some of their best practices and doing a speaker series and bringing those forward? And are we going to, in some of these very specific categories where we haven't maybe moved as much? And the one that I'm very interested in is the Prepared for Success. Yes. And I'd love you to explain that one a little bit more, but I don't know that anybody's really hitting that one out of the park. And so are we looking for those districts that may not be the New Albany public where they're drowning in their dollars, but maybe other districts, and pulling them in and asking people to come in and present and create those development opportunities? And I think, just to put an exclamation point on what you said, our teachers are the front lines, and then the principals are, they're not the bosses, they're the enablers of the teachers to do their job. And I think the engagement work that we're talking about at CPS is going to impact that. We are going to have, I think, a huge return by focusing on the engagement of those people that are right in front, and then measuring that by building and by work team. So if you could speak to a little bit about how is that specifically, the Prepared for Success? This has come up multiple times in the community to me in the past month. Could you give us the Cliff Notes version on how we explain that to the average parent or community member?
Sure. Okay, so basically, it looks at, in the denominator, is your 2018 four-year cohort plus your 2017 five-year cohort. So it's both combined who were in that class, whether or not they graduated or not. In the numerator is any student who had a remediation-free ACT score or SAT score, they get 1 point. And if that student, in addition to that, gets at least a 3 on one or more AP exam, they'll get an additional 0.3. So each student can get up to a maximum of 1.3. And it's literally adding up all the kids who got a 1 or 1.3, dividing that by the total number of kids in the 2018 and 2017 cohort. Was that helpful?
That's very clear. Thank you.
And as far as next steps, we just had a meeting on that today, and researching what are some urbans across the nation is doing. And the #1 urban is Chicago. They're known as the National AP District. And they have some very specific things that we are doing, and we have contacted them and are going to set up a visit. I also want to go back to we have some experts right here in Cincinnati. Stacy Hill Simmons has demonstrated what success looks like for all kids. And we just had a group of cohort principals, it was probably about 15, who went around to our schools in classrooms. She was so gracious. Her leadership team met with other teachers across the district to work out individualized plans for students. So we are going to continue that work and collaborate with our experts in our schools to scale best practices that we know works within our own system.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ms. Bowers.
I would first like to thank you for your report. This is very thorough. And as encouraging as it is to see the closing, the gap closing, many of these are elementary schools. I'm very concerned about the grades of the majority of our high schools and the disparity among our racial and racial disparities in their grades, in their points. And when I reviewed a report, there's at least 35 to 50% disparity just between two subgroups by themselves. And when we think of equity, I want someone to please talk about how we're intentionally trying to close that gap better. outside of SCPA, outside of Walnut Hills, Hughes, STEM, and maybe Clark, there were many Fs in gap closing for our high schools.
I'll start off and then I'll let Emily also talk about. The first approach is to do some preventive work, and that's why you see some of the stuff happening in the elementaries. So if they have a good foundation as they go up, they are better prepared. But we also have to support those students who are currently in the high schools. So this year, we have added reading and math specialists. Their schedules, and this is the first year, their schedules are 80-20. So 80% of the time, they will be with students. 20% of the times, they will be doing leading, facilitating PD with classroom teachers. We also started last year companion classes. So it's basically interventions to fill gaps that students may have.
We also are investing in NWEA MAP, which is a norm referenced assessment, so that we can make some articulated, individualized plans for our students. All students can learn content deeply, and we want to know early in 7th, 8th, 9th grade what we can do to support them. And we are also working around course offerings at each of our schools and making sure that some of our students who are Spanish speaking, that they are then taking Spanish classes or what they need so they can be successful in the AP Spanish test. So we are looking closely at where our disparities are, and we have tools now where we can identify and then intervene and support, and in some cases excite to get them wanting to take our courses.
Right.
I will also add, for the early intervention, it's called ABC. So we're looking at attendance, behavior, and course and grades. And we're looking at that early on, and our Assistant Superintendent, Shauna Murphy, is leading that charge to look at this dashboard that was created by Justin Leach, our Director of Testing, and then coming together to provide those interventions.
Thank you again to the team for the report. We look forward to hearing more as we move forward with all the new innovations. So we really appreciate the report. Thank you. Okay, Superintendent, introduce the next presentation.
Yes, gladly. So 2 years ago, the board spoke on more than one occasion about the administration and all of our staff members following, first of all, being aware of board policies when they change, and then following board policies, and then procedures to go along with them. And so under strategic plan goal, optimize capabilities, our legal counsel, Dan Hoying, is leading the charge around policy revision, as well as the procedures to go along with those policies.
Thank you. Good evening. I have just a relatively short presentation this evening, again, on our efforts to improve the district's procedures. And again, this relates back to the strategic plan and specifically optimized capabilities. One of our measures is to, quote, create and publish documented procedures that are centrally available for every department and to ensure that every new or amended board policy has an associated procedure. So a tall order, but as the superintendent pointed out, our efforts here, I think, really began when she was appointed as superintendent. As of 2019, there are approximately 330 CPS board policies organized into 10 different categories. I think you're all well familiar with kind of the way our board policies are organized. 2 years ago, in 2017, the superintendent directed that the members of the performance leadership team review every single board policy. And so with that review, we were looking at whether or not the policies are consistent with federal and state law, whether they're reflective of our current practices, whether there's equity implications, whether those policies give us adequate direction from you to be able to know what your expectations are for the district, as well as whether there's flexibility enough for us to be able to implement them across 60-plus very, very different schools. So that was kind of our assignment. The feedback we got and the review has then been shared with you during our policy committee meetings. The board, at about the same time, very helpfully started undertaking a kind of 3-year cycle review of board policies. And so the feedback that performance leadership team members have then been shared with you during policy committee meetings as we cycle through all the board policies. During about the same time, we began our effort in drafting board procedures, to implement the board policies. I think for most departments, they may have had some level of procedures, but they weren't formally documented in all cases. And so in the last 12 months, really, we have put together more than 250 procedures that have been recently drafted. We used a template, which you can see kind of there. It includes what's a background for the procedure, who's responsible, what are the action steps that are needed, are there equity considerations, are there related documents and forms that are a part of that procedure, and any additional information. So to give you an example of what kind of a procedure looks like, this is a procedure from our facilities department related to renting facilities. Who's responsible, the facilities director. The action steps kind of takes you through how someone would rent a CPS facility for an event, who gets those applications, who reviews and approves those. And then there's forms associated as well. So the building application is really a part of this procedure. The fee schedule is a part of this procedure. And so this is just an example of a procedure that we've created. Next step is publishing those procedures. And so that is already underway, the publication of those procedures. So if you would go on our StaffNet website right now, pretty much every department has a department manual, and within that department manual are all the procedures that are relevant to that area. So that they are already being published on the MyCPS StaffNet website. Shortly, we hope to also have these procedures all laid out in a table view that links to the board policy that procedure implements. So again, they are already being published in the department manuals and soon will be published as kind of a table view as well. This is just an example. If you linked on, again, that Office of Communications and Engagement Department Manual, you would find about a, 200-page, 150-page document, and it includes procedures implementing all of those board policies that relate to the communications and engagement area. Finally, a part of this process is to make sure that we stay on it, that we continue to update the procedures that we're developing. And so this is essentially what we've that we've developed in terms of making sure that we are updating procedures. So whenever the board enacts a new policy or amends a policy, the board office always notifies us. The PLT is already reviewing new and amended policies on a monthly basis. We assign those policies to the appropriate staff to develop or update procedures. We want those procedures developed as a general rule within 90 days. There's certainly sometimes, I think, when we need them more quickly, but a deadline of kind of 90 days. New procedures are then reviewed by our office and Lauren Worley's office, and then published to StaffNet and communicated to staff. On an annual basis, at least on an annual basis, we also request, the superintendent has directed that PLT members review their department manuals, make sure that policies and procedures are updated and relevant. So that's kind of the process that we've put together. I'm happy to take any questions.
Board members have questions or comments? Just one comment. We're feeling the results of this process. So thank you to the policy committee, because they, I think in the committee it's clear, that's driven, it's a task, and we see it in our board meetings with the number of resolutions to change and modify. Thanks. Any other questions? Ms. Bolton?
Yes. I want to compliment the superintendent for this initiative. I've been here, this is my 12th year, and in the last 2 years are the years that I actually believe that the community is being represented through the board to the administration, in large part because of this effort on policy and procedure. It's a bureaucratic thing, it's nuts and bolts, and people may not fully understand it, but if you do not have what she has now put in place with all of your efforts, you do not have a perpetual way of representing the community's interests through to the leadership of the bureaucracy. And I think that it's critical that people understand this was not occurring the 10 years that I was here before the last 2. We couldn't see procedures. We weren't sure that policies were being followed, let alone updated, and whether they were actually informing the administration. I think this is singularly important on behalf of the community. It sounds bureaucratic, but actually this is true engagement and perpetual engagement when you have policies that link to procedure and implementation. And I really commend the superintendent and the whole staff that's put that together. I think it's very, very, very important.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Hoying. We also, I think, just to superintendent speak to the whole process that you have of, we have a strategic plan, and we're hearing sort of a baseline where we are right now, and I think that that's been very informative and helpful, and because it is transparent. So thank you so much for providing the leadership around that. Appreciate it. Okay. Moving on quickly, does anyone have any kudos? Kudo man is on vacation. Anybody else? Mr. Messer.
Well, I think there are a whole host of kudos that surround the opening of the Willard Stargell Stadium. If you weren't there, you missed an electric night of people from the Stargell family, people that have been longtime Weston residents, our students, their families, community leaders, alumni, and I can't say that I'm an avid football fan, that I'm an expert in stadiums, but I will tell you when I walked in there, I was like, wow. And, I think that this is a stadium that it doesn't matter what district you're in, you would be proud of this stadium. And, it's not just for one school, it's for lots of our schools. And, I think it was a big nut for us to take on doing that. At the same time, we were doing a massive renovation to open the Gamble School, to open the Cannes School, to refit the old Gamble School. I mean, there was a lot going on. And somebody said, well, I think it's only 95% complete. And I almost hit them. Because I'm like, you don't know what else was on the plate of these people. This was a monumental achievement. And so kudos to the superintendent and the entire staff for pulling that off and delivering for our children, not just a good stadium, a world-class stadium.
Thank you so much. Yes. And the ceremony went well, other than the fact that it was 100 degrees on the field. Some of us don't tolerate heat well. Okay, thank you. Any other kudos? Thank you. We are now at the item on our agenda for hearing the public. Each speaker, I'm sorry, I always do that. Sorry, Ms. Bates, retirements.
Yes, we have 3 people to acknowledge this evening that are retiring from our staff. And they are all civil service personnel, Sharon L. Ociello and James A. Walton, paraprofessionals, and Cheryl L. Whitaker, an accountant. We congratulate you on your retirement and thank you for your service to our students.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bates. Okay, now, We are at the item on our agenda for hearing the public. Each speaker has 3 minutes to speak, and Mrs. Wagner will be our timekeeper. When the buzzer goes off, your 3 minutes are up. Please refrain from discussing any personnel items. So when your name is called, please come to the podium to speak. I will call you by 3. Kevin Hoffman, Ann and Paul Repke? Yeah. Great. Jessica Rothwell.
I was here, it's weird, I don't like talking in front of people. Here to talk about the transportation department. There was a nice presentation on how well the school district is improving, and how it's important to see the different ways to measure that. I think you need to do that with your vendors. It is pretty clear, as an auditor, I'm very well aware of how to do and measure vendor performance. You guys are not monitoring and measuring your performance of your vendors. My daughter's bus has not picked her up yet this year on time. Man, I really hate talking in front of people. The only time she's been on school property on time is when I personally dropped her off. I don't know how any of the programs, the women who were speaking with Ms. Mott just a little bit ago about improving the district's abilities, how those will ever take off fully if you don't get the kids to school on time. Especially for those kids who need things like the free breakfast that is provided. I'm fortunate. My daughter doesn't need that. I have the ability to take my daughter to school. But I think it's atrocious that the buses haven't been to pick her up once this year on time. But what I really think is bad is trying to reach out and ask and get responses from anyone. I left, I want to say it was about 10 emails, phone calls, and walking into the district. And the only person who has contacted me back, I think her name is Phyllis with the board, the assistant.
Phyllis Davis.
She was very kind and responded and said that she forwarded one of my emails along to you. I emailed the director of transportation. I emailed the supervisor. I've been here personally twice, and I've had 0 contact from someone. I don't know how anyone thinks that it's okay for a public entity to have their people not respond to the public. And I also think it's really, really sad that the buses are as bad as they are. I understand you're working. I understand that the new process was designed to try and save the district money. I applaud that thinking. But if you don't monitor and understand the performance, you don't lay out service level agreements in your vendor contracts, you will never know how well that goes. And I'm an expert at that. I do that for a living. It's very clear that that's not happening. So.
Thank you, sir. Ann and Paul Repke.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. We're here on the transportation issue as well. We have 4 children that attend St. Ursula Villa. We had our Cincinnati public transportation in the past. Like I said, we have 4 kids aging from 1st grade to 8th grade. We've had a lot of difficulty this year with transportation. We were in the gateway system in early summer. It was validated, everything was in place. The kids were brought home the first day of school on the bus route. Lo and behold, they were not on the route. They were not supposed to be on that bus. They were never put into the system. The second day, they were refused transportation home. My husband and I both work full-time. We have been exhausted with the process and have gone to the Ohio Department of Education to try to get some answers. We know that from the Ohio Department, the mediator said that we have been deemed impractical, that we're not going to get it, but we can't go into mediation until the board approves the letters that were supposed to be mass sent out. We are now in the 4th week of school. We live 3.2 miles door to door from school to home. We live in Mount Washington, which is not in the catch system of Hyde Park. So we are an entity outside of the cluster. But again, it's 4 children. The bus is not at capacity, and the current schedule is less than 30 minutes for the route time. We have either been paying $44 a day, $11 per student, for aftercare from 3 to 4, or been taking time off of work to pick them up and bring them home. We honestly don't know where to go from here. If you're the governing body that can put them on a route or look further into this, we implore you to do so. If that's not the reason for the meeting or for us coming, then we just ask that we get the letter that it's impractical so we can move forth with Ohio Revised Code into mediation. Either way, we're in the 4th week of school. It's financially and professionally not a foreseeable long-term solution for us to keep up like this. 2 of our kids are on accommodation plans. The chaos of not knowing day to day if I'm going to get out of the clinic in time, if he's going to get off of work, the financial burden, it's just, we don't know where else to go. So we were advised by the Ohio board to come tonight. They provided us a little bit of guidance in the process and asked that they've contacted your transportation department. I've come down in person. We've exhausted all avenues. That it's really archaic that we're in the 4th week of school and can't get a letter to provide our kids transportation. So I don't know where to go. So we're asking you either provide the letter or put us on a route. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any questions?
No.
Okay.
We have your information. I'm going to note on here about the letter. And so we'll make sure that we give it to our administration so that someone will be in touch with you, okay?
Would it be okay to leave the letter we provided to the Ohio Department
You
of
can leave it
Education
with
also?
Ms. Davis right there.
Okay. Oh, and kudos to her. She was such a breath of fresh air. Phyllis, thank you.
Do you want the letter, Superintendent, or do you want to give the?
I would, but I would also ask, if you don't mind, if after the last person who speaks about transportation speaks, to ask our Chief Strategy Officer, Sarah Trimble Oliver, to go out and meet with and talk with those families so that we can see if we can resolve those issues as quickly as possible. I will say, just for your benefit, the memos that I've been sending you regarding transportation with the updates and the communication back to parents, Mr. Kevin Hoffman's information is in there.
Okay.
So I'll just refer you to that, please.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
our next speaker is Jessica Rothwell, and those are the 3 people who are coming to speak on transportation. So then we'll ask that they meet with them in the hallway. Thank you.
Transportation again, yes. Yellow bus system to and from Hyde Park is not aligned with your board's great systems, strategic goals, or learning environment. The neighborhood students are getting on the bus up to 45 minutes before school starts and arriving late. These students have missed breakfast, which the population includes students that utilize the free breakfast program. They're also missing time to transition to school with less stress and anxiety and missing valuable instructional time. Students riding the bus home are having increased stress with the frequent route changes, even only being communicated during the school day without the staff knowing until they get on the bus. Staff changes with the drivers and delayed routes. First Student does not communicate delays in a timely manner for all stakeholders. In addition, it's a challenge to get a hold of someone when there is a major issue, like a missing student. For example, my son had an hour and 50-minute ride home last week that took him to Fairfield. The only way I knew is that I made 3 different calls to First Student with 3 different responses over that hour to get him home. He had 2 different buses. The bus that took him to Fairfield was more worried about getting the students for a game to their destination for her next thing than getting my 10-year-old home. CPS transportation department still to this day has not followed up with my family to ensure that my student can utilize the bus services with safety and being reliable. My family and others are being forced to pay before care and after care due to the lack of reliability and safe transportation for our neighborhood elementary students to meet the needs of the whole child and ensure that they have a safe way to get to and from school.
Thank you. We are going to ask, who's going to meet with them? Sarah Trimble Oliver. Where do you want them? Would you like them to go? Okay. And that she can talk with you personally about some next steps. Thank you. All right, the last group here, Tom Frank, Jeffrey, Demery, and Julie Sellers.
Good evening, Cincinnati Public School Board. Thanks for having me here. I wanted to give a thanks to the administration and everyone that worked real hard, and you all for listening to my complaints and craziness at the start of the Gamble school year. But we really, really love our new building, and thank you all so much. It's really, really pretty. I'm here to talk in support of the resolution on Vision Zero. So a few weeks ago, Gamble was, we were on intercession about 2 weeks ago, I guess. And we were walking from Gamble to Dater and then back. And at the last bit of the day, we were right at the corner of, I guess that was Ferguson and Work Road. And at that intersection, we were crossing over Work. There's a no turn on red. Well, a car was very agitated with our students crossing the street because they couldn't go right on red. They couldn't go right on green because our students were crossing. Someone was honking and yelling at our students, like, hurry up, honking at the car in front of us. Luckily, one of the cars in front of us was a mother of one of our students, and I tried to be very kind and say, hey, please settle down. We're trying to make sure our students are safe. But the agitated driver then, once it got to red, she went around the car in front of it and ran the red light and proceeded to flip the bird to my students and I as we're just trying to get everybody safe. So why I'm here is kind of to just introduce the conversation and bring forth the conversation that we need to start talking about and changing the culture throughout all of Cincinnati. And as a governing body of the education that happens in the public sector of Cincinnati, I think we need to be a part of this conversation. So let's make sure, I appreciate the work on the Vision Zero resolution, and please make sure we support the Vision Zero resolution. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr., I'm sorry that I'm not pronouncing your name accurately. Demering. Thank you.
The kids at West High call me Mr. D, and you know why.
Mr. D, okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I found this in the shrubs outside West High on my way in to set up my classroom this year. The vice principal was standing nearby. I asked her if I could have it. She asked why. And I said, well, this is an artifact. This is a piece of Western Hills University High School history, for better or for worse. And I'm a history teacher. I don't believe in throwing them away. Perhaps it'd be useful at some point. A few days later, on the first day of school, I had an excuse to bust this out again. So in front of all the 8th grade classes, we talked about pedestrian safety and how a car is not going to have any problem going through your body. Look at what it does to a sign. A few days after that, in our first bell, a group of my students were very, very upset in the back of the room. They explained to me that they were with a student who was run over in Glenway Avenue. They described to me how her leg was bent on an awkward angle. They described to me how blood was rushing from her skull and what the blood looked like on Glenway Avenue. And then they said something I'll never forget. They said, we did exactly what you asked, Mr. D. We were in the crosswalk. We took our headphones out, and we were together paying attention. We did exactly what you asked us to do, Mr. D. So now, for the second time this school year, I bust out my sign. And for the second time this school year, I get to share a quote, one of my favorite quotes ever, by Maya Angelou. She said, "History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again." The first time I shared that quote was with my students, encouraging them to be brave as we look at some of the topics that we're going to have to cover this year. The second time I share it's with you, and hopefully understand how appropriate it is. I'm very tired. I have lesson planning to do when I get home. I am here in front of you because my 8th grade students want me to be here. I am here as their advocate, and I am here to represent them and be their voice. And on behalf of the 8th grade students at Western Hills University, I would like to present you with this piece of history. And we would like to ask you to have the courage to support Vision Zero. Can I give this to you? It's quite emotional to see exactly how loud and how little respected this one thing keeping our students safe actually was. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ms. Sellers. And I do, periodically, I'd like to remind our audience, I'm sorry, yes, thank you. I'd like to remind our audience that Ms. Sellers is the president of the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers, and her 3-minute limit is waived.
Thank you, and
You're
I hope I will be well under the 3 minutes.
Okay.
But from what I am hearing from the community, what I am hearing from parents, what I am hearing from teachers, is that it's not safe for many of our children going to and from school. And what I would like to suggest is that we have a campaign that's citywide and reach out to all of our community partners to be part of that campaign so that it is a citywide discussion on making sure children are safe to and from school. I think that we need to ask the city council, if they would do a complete audit of the Cincinnati Police Department, and that we would like to know how they are enforcing the speed limits in the school zones around every school, especially on the west side. It's ridiculous when you try to drive how unsafe it is, but it's really scary. And I don't even know how the crossing guards are safe to even cross the children in the crosswalks, because that is a job I would be terrified to do, and they are standing out there helpless. It's something that we really do need to talk about. But I would also like to talk about transportation, and some of that is making sure that the students are getting on and off of the buses safely around each and every school. And I know that transportation has been, the scheduling has been a problem, and could the internal auditor do some sort of internal audit of all of those routes? Because I know I was driving and I saw school buses leaving a charter school at the end of the day, and there were several buses pulling off and leaving school, so it's not like they missed the bus or anything, and those buses were all empty. And so why are we paying for empty buses that are leaving schools after school? It doesn't make sense, and that maybe that's something that could be looked at with the internal auditor, so that is not just the CPS students, but what's going on even with the charter schools and the students in the private and parochial. And then my last thing is, I know that we have a lot of changes going on with the district, and I've had people ask me and request to see if I had a copy of the org chart of how the district is now operating, and if that's something that we would have availability of getting. And then the last thing that I want to do is publicly invite everyone who is here, or everybody in the audience. This Saturday from 11:30 to 1:30, CFT is having their annual COPE luncheon, and we would like to invite everyone to attend. It should be a great event, and we do have, it is homemade fried chicken from Humbert's Meats, and it's better than any restaurant in the city. And it was a really great event for the last few years. And so if everybody is welcome to come, it will be at the Letter Carriers Hall on 4100 Coleraine Avenue in Northside.
What's the date again?
This Saturday, September 21st. I think you were there last year, weren't you?
Yeah.
It's a fun day.
Very good, yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. So we're going to move on to our board matters this evening, and I'm going to ask our next presenters to come on down, and I'll begin to kind of put the discussion in context. Probably more than a month ago, Ms. Bowers and I were invited to come down and meet with a group of developers, sort of to begin to dialogue a little bit about this whole conversation about tax abatements. And we came back to the board believing, and Ms. Bowers can speak to that, believing that this was a voice that we had not heard from, and that it might be beneficial to at least ask them, invite them to come and present sort of a developer's perspective. And so we have tonight Jim Nyer of Al Nyer Development and Tom Rowe of Terex Development here to present, and you see the title here is Developers as Partners, CPS and Tax Incentive Agreement. So I'm going to turn it over to you for your presentation.
Great. Thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Jim Nyer. I'm with Al Nyer. We are a Cincinnati-based real estate developer with in-house design and construction. We are also in other markets. We're in Pittsburgh, Nashville, and Raleigh. So we have a broad perspective of how development happens across a broader region. We are really here tonight to explain the development. I appreciate that setup about how we work in partnership with communities to improve the communities. We're not here to, this is not a negotiation or anything like that. We're just simply trying to explain the process that goes through development and some of the incentives which the school board has been cooperative with in the past. With that, then I'll turn it over to Tom to introduce himself.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. Yes, my name is Tom Rowe. I work with Terex Development Construction. We're a Cincinnati-based development construction company. I'm also a very proud CPS parent. I've got 2 little boys at home, one of whom goes to Hyde Park, the other goes to Walnut Hills. I've served on our neighborhood council in support of our local school. I've also started a foundation to help Hyde Park Elementary. So I come at this from 2 perspectives, one professional by day, but the other very personal by night, and I appreciate everything you do in support of our kids. Just seeing you all tonight, I understand the big job that you have and all the stakeholders you have to please. But as a resident of Cincinnati, we're very vested in this, but I'm here to talk more about commercial than I am residential, meaning Jim and I are commercial real estate developers, and there's an important distinction between commercial and residential. Whereas, the residential market is single-family homes, and there are abatements associated with those. We're here to talk about the commercial real estate abatements. So commercial projects are, office buildings, retail buildings, large multifamily projects that exceed 4 or 5 units. These are the projects that drive employment, that drive entertainment and commerce, and are in large part responsible for the vibrancy of our city. And we've seen a lot of change over the last decade, and Jim and I would like to continue to see that change for the positive in the future. So it's not just, these abatements bring public investment into projects. They, in a way, you look at it as though the public investment is what you don't see, meaning it's a lot of infrastructure, it's streets, it's utilities, it's parking, whereas the private dollars are what you see built above all that infrastructure. And we need the private investment to make those things happen. And private capital is is driven by returns, by viability, meaning people invest money just like we all invest in our 401ks. We'd like to get our money back and hopefully make a little bit on top of that. If we're not providing that same competitive environment, we can't attract that private capital investment to not only to our projects, but to our city. Development not only spurs the activity specific to a project, but it brings on other activity. Look at what's happened in Over the Rhine with, a large investment by 3CDC and others that's brought other private investment to bear and has really leveraged those public dollars to much bigger real estate tax revenues for the city and for CPS. With that, I'll turn it back over to Jim.
Thanks, Tom. So ultimately, the incentives that are out there are really, I don't really like to call them incentives. They are gap fillers. There are projects that are done that cannot stand on their own. And so they're, as Tom said, things that are public in nature, utilities, streets, parking garages, are primarily what those dollars are used for. They are used until those expenses are paid for. So essentially, the tax revenue, this newly created tax revenue, only because of that project, is used as essentially a mortgage payment to pay off these public improvements. They're not incentives to go into the pocket of a developer or its end users. And ultimately, those jobs then are, there's jobs created during the construction that are in the buildings themselves. There's residents that are living there that increase the overall tax value of the community. And so these payments are taxes that are only created because of the new property are directed towards paying off that infrastructure. And then once the payments end, it's back on the full tax rolls for the community. And this is not something that is just being paid for by CPS. The tax abatement applies across all spectrums within it. And frankly, for example, pick the zoos who have a tax levy. That tax is abated. They get, for that incremental improvement. There's no additional revenue sharing that goes on. So the schools, by state law, are protected in that respect. Can you give me the next slide, please? Yep, there you go. And so we have these large, generally they're on larger projects. I'll take a couple that our company has done. For example, the Vernon Manor conversion to office space. There was a very dilapidated building, very much going into disrepair, right at the gateway to the uptown area. And Children's, stepped up and said they would be willing to be a tenant in there, take this building and make it productive for the area, but it needed parking. So we built a parking garage that's there on Burnett that is a public garage. Yes, it's primarily used for the parking of Children's, but it took a building, kept those jobs in the city, and in fact, Children's Hospital, which is a tax-exempt organization, not required to pay property taxes because they leased, they were willing to pay property taxes and help that happen. Otherwise, that project may not have happened, and certainly if Children's had done it on their own, there would have been no property taxes in that case. U Square was a big project we did up at UC. A blighted multiple blocks that now has the benefit of parking garages for the community, housing for the students. There's actually low-income housing in that project as well, and some well-needed retail amenities there. Again, the tax abatement was a tax increment financing project that built the garages and some of the infrastructure around there. And what it's done to create then the private investment that is in the area and will continue to. And again, the real problem here in Cincinnati is that, you know, we're a great city. There's a lot of wonderful things, and it always amazes me that there aren't more companies that want to come here and locate because we have a low cost of living. But our rents don't rise, but construction costs do. And so gaps are created, and we need to, you know, fill these gaps to get things happening, and that's where the tax incentives come on to help close that for us. These are truly partnerships. We work with the city of Cincinnati in particular, but we also work with other communities in the region. You know, for example, we're doing a project in Blue Ash, different school district, of course, but Blue Ash has to use certain incentives to get development to work and pay for itself. Again, primarily for building roads and parking out there. And we have to prove to the city that there's a gap, that this project is going to only work if there's a tax incentive to make it work, to get a fair market return on our capital investment, and for the part that is cannot be funded through that, to use the tax abatements. There is all of us are, it's really about economics here. I mean, obviously the school district is it's challenged with finding enough funding to do the good work that's done here. The city of Cincinnati is always looking for funds that are short, and then to do these development projects, there's gaps, and so there's pressure everywhere. There's some added pressure with this VTICA that the city has put in place. One of the great benefits of that, though, is that they are trying to reinvest into affordable housing for all of our residents. And that's one of the, I think, one of the big shames, you know, is that we don't have enough affordable housing for our residents and frankly, the families that are going to the schools.
So we realize this issue is complicated, and we're doing our best to simplify it a little bit. The bottom line is, without these incentives, a lot of these projects wouldn't move forward. And so this graph is just intended to show kind of the baseline, meaning if property today is taxed and there are revenue shared from those tax proceeds, and if no project and there's no abatement, that will move, that'll be there forever and a day. If a project does move forward with no abatement, and they do happen, you get the base tax and then the incremental tax benefit that's created by that value that's created. Meaning when we do a project, we create value in that process. You take property that was worth $10 and hopefully it's worth at least $12 tomorrow after your project is complete. And so what we're talking about is that $2 incremental value. And with a project with abatement, you get the base tax, you've got the net property tax value after the abatement rolls off, but there's also a pilot payment in the interim that benefits the city, the CPS. And then the other nice thing is that based on our understanding, it doesn't impact the state funding formula. So the abatements do shield the city of Cincinnati. I know it's been a challenge because our city is viewed as a economically rich city, whereas your students come from backgrounds that are diverse and challenged many times. And so that state funding formula isn't fair, and we get that. The nice thing about these abatements is they do shield some of that value from the state funding formula in the process. So an incentive is granted. Now, what happens? As Jim said, we go through a very stringent process on the front end to make sure that incentive is required, that the increment is needed to support infrastructure for a project. The city has an outside firm that audits those numbers and makes sure that our numbers are correct. And so once an incentive is granted, CPS receives the same tax base, meaning that base level doesn't change. We're talking about the incremental increase in value. There's a pilot payment, as we talked about before. And then we've also eliminated blighted property, meaning we've put many times property that is not of economic value to the city back to work, and hopefully creating opportunities for employment, for office, for commerce to happen here in our great city. And at the end of the day, there are more tax dollars by raising the values of surrounding properties. So as I said, you look at over the Rhine and what's happened there, there were increment proceeds used to create a lot of that value, but it's created other investment around that area. And you look on the whole in what has been achieved in terms of net value increase to real estate tax, and that's been a net positive overall. So this calculation is something that has been shared with us from the Chamber of Commerce, again, trying to simplify things. From $1 million tax abatement, it reduces Cincinnati Public Schools' local property tax revenue by about $11,200 annually, about 1.12%. The recipient of the $1 million abatement is required to pay $8,500 to CPS and pilot payments. An abatement of $1 million results in $9,800 in an annual increase in revenue from the state of Ohio through the funding formula. So at the end of the day, CPS under the current system receives about $7,100 more revenue from a abated property than it would if no abatement was in place. And again, we recognize there's lots of smart people crunching these numbers on both sides. We're just here to share what we've learned. Back to Jim.
It just occurred to me as we were throwing about some jargon. I think all of you are aware of what a pilot is, just for the benefit of the crowd. A pilot is a payment in lieu of taxes, for shared discussion there. There's a list of projects up there that would not have happened. These are some notable projects, relatively current, that have happened because of having a tax abatement system in place. But just about every neighborhood in the city of Cincinnati has had some level of abatement. There are TIF districts set up throughout that have been used for the increments to continue to improve upon those individual communities. In many cases, it hits me here, some of the crosswalk discussion and what's going on is that in some areas they've been to improve that. I would like to see more of that based on what I heard here tonight. Ultimately, the tax incentives that are out there reduce blight. They take underutilized property and improve it for the benefit of the community. They don't last forever. They're used until the gap is filled and has been paid for. It does, as Tom just went through the example, increases the overall tax revenue to the public schools. They increase the overall benefit to the neighborhoods because there really is a multiplying effect about improving certain areas, and it raises the property values throughout. And those are just a natural more income for the entire tax base. And unfortunately, it's necessary for the urban renaissance that's happening in Cincinnati. So with that, I don't know if there's any questions, but we appreciate your time.
Okay, I believe board members do have questions. I'm going to start with Vice Chair Messer and then Ms. Bates.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in. And I think it's important to have representation from the development community here as part of the conversation. I had been getting, conversations throughout the city saying, gosh, you guys are I heard your board's against any developer agreements and totally against developer incentives. And it just wasn't a conversation I was hearing from my board. And I think this is starting to open up some dialogue. I think in full transparency, the majority of the emails and conversations that I've had regarding abatements happen to do specifically with residential, which we have nothing to do with. And as it related to the commercial agreements, I don't think it had as much to do with the developers as it had to do with what the process was at the city and ensuring that there was equity and there was fairness and there weren't kind of odd meetings required for certain to take place and for others that wasn't required. But I think this is a dialogue as it relates to, another stakeholder that is important to the district. And what we found in our benchmarking was the partnership could go well beyond kind of just this discussion, because I probably share the same crane envy that maybe some people do in this room, that I hate driving into Columbus and seeing it's exploding. And there was a point where Cincinnati was well ahead of Columbus in the not too distant past. And I feel like things have slowed a bit. I don't think any of us want to see that do anything but accelerate here. But one of the other things that I think have been part of the conversation was, how do we start to stitch together this conversation going forward holistically, thinking about the opportunities that these jobs may create for our students, and how we can do workforce development as part of the growth and development of our city. And, I know the Chamber had another leadership day where they went to another city. And again, I saw there was nobody from education necessarily specific or related. I think this is such a big opportunity to get CPS for people to understand education is the part of the ecosystem of a vibrant city, as developers are, as so many other stakeholders are. So thank you for coming and giving an overview. But what I'll say is, I think I have not felt that this board has been anti-development, and I think this is an important part of us having a comprehensive understanding of the issue, specifically around our 99 agreement. And thank you for the presentation. Hopefully we can get a copy of that.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Bates.
Yes, and thank you very much. And again, I echo Mr. Messer's sentiment that this board is not anti-development at all. I mean, what we are for is ensuring that we get our fair share that we truly need to educate our children and give them an equitable education. And our competition isn't Cleveland and Toledo, and it's Wyoming, it's Oak Hills, it's our neighboring districts, and even some of the private schools. So that's our standard. So we want to make sure that we have the resources for our children that other districts are getting higher ratings are giving to their children. So that understood. I agree with Mr. Messer. We've never had the anti-development conversation ever. But what is very, very frustrating, and I'm not sure who's putting out this information. You said the Chamber of Commerce. We hear it's, the city is, all of a sudden everybody's experts in state funding. We don't benefit in the way that you've illustrated. And perhaps we need to work with, I don't know if we need to work with the chamber or, individual developers to let you know that's not the case at all. The state funding formula that we're being held harmless because the property values aren't figured in, that's really not part of the equation, and that we benefit $9,800 on $1 million piece of property. Have you seen that, Ms. Treasurer? That just doesn't exist. But it seems to be a rumor out there, or that is the case. I'm not sure who's putting it out, who the number crunchers are, if it's being used to sway some people to side with, we're in negotiations. So anyway, I would really implore you to not include state funding in what you perceive to be an advantage for us, because it's not there. It doesn't happen.
And to your point, Ms. Bates, I think this brings up the point of this issue needs to have discussion, meaning we need to bring the powers that be, the decision makers together to have these conversations so that misinformation is not being used, because that's why we qualified that illustration tonight, because it's complicated and elusive in terms of how this all works. And so if we can all get together and have the conversation, I think what you're feeling is the importance of the issue to the city and to many of the stakeholders, and that's why it's become so charged. So appreciate your perspective and absolutely agree that we need to get together and discuss it.
And,
Ms. Bolton, I'm sorry.
And I
Go
would
ahead.
to address the comment on anti-development, I would say that I have not heard anyone that has said that, at least in the development ranks, that CPS is anti-development. And if I, in our comments here at all, gave that impression, I apologize. That was not our intent. We want to be good partners with everyone in the community. We believe that we are, and when we're not, we want to be held accountable to that. But there is, a shared need for economic development for our entire community, creating jobs for the students, for their parents, having good, safe neighborhoods. That is all a shared interest, and I think we're all very much aligned with that.
Thank you. Ms. Bolton.
Yes, thank you. I'm having flashbacks with Mr. Rowe here, and then also some 30-some years ago in Mount Healthy City Council, I recall the Nair Company coming to talk about some development in the general area when I was there in City Council. And I have to tell you, though, whatever Mr. Rao says, I agree with, because we were in the midst of secret meetings to make sure that the Hyde Park School took place. And so he and his wife made multiple appearances here, but a number of other coffee stops along the way. So I appreciate that both of them are here, and they both represent great companies. My issue is that, yes, we will echo, we're not against development. We spent $1.2 billion, 80% of it local tax dollars, to redevelop this whole school district, and it's very significant, and we think that's part of the renaissance too. But I think the issue that we're having, as Ms. Bates mentioned, there is some incorrect information out there, at least from our perspective. The other piece is that we are interested in the development, but also in stabilizing our neighborhoods and improving our neighborhoods, and having, as you mentioned, Mr. Nair, the availability of affordable housing for our families. So there's all those things churning in all of it. But I would just encourage the developers, particularly, to see if they can weave their way to City Council, because right now we're having a great deal of difficulty getting the city to even enter into a dialogue as we approach the end of this agreement. And I encourage also some folks that we were with on Saturday over for the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers, that's right now the stepping stone and the blocking. Either they're going to negotiate with us or they're not going to negotiate with us. So I appreciate the presentation. I think it was needed. I'm glad you brought it. But I really think that City Council needs to start having some appearances as well. And unless people don't want that agreement, and they don't want the school system and the children to get the money, or they don't want all of the other folks along the way that are also on the backside of everybody's tax collection, where you see that it's the zoo and it's the hospital and it's mental health and everything else. So I think it would be great. I think actually you all might be the emissaries or intermediaries, if you will, and that might be helpful for us. Thank you.
So once again, on behalf of the board, we thank you for coming down. I personally thank you because when I came to the meeting and not really knowing what to expect, I felt like you listened to Pam and I ramble on about stuff we didn't know anything about. But it was really helpful. And I think we have gained much more information and value around the developer's perspective. And so I agree with what my colleagues are saying, that it's either going to be an incentive to move forward with the city or a blockage, and we got to get at the table with them. And so we appreciate you coming tonight, and we look forward to having more dialogue with you and a partnership. So we thank you very much. Our treasurer, I think, wants to have a comment.
Yes. So I would very respectfully ask or offer my time to meet with you to go over some of the confusing information. And I'd like to clarify for those in the audience that the state foundation formula that we were under did exempt or remove abated and exempt properties from the wealth index. It's a very complicated calculation. It lags 2 years behind. And because we are in a growth capacity, our revenues are capped from 1 year to the next. And so we did not benefit from recent abatements. In fact, now that we are no longer under the formula that was ruled unconstitutional 4 times, we no longer have a formula, and so property values are not in consideration at all. We are capped at our revenues from last year regardless of what happens with those abated properties. And so any new abatements since the last update, which would have been in 17, if I'm not mistaken, we are financially harmed by that. The revenues are further complicated in that, but our property taxes are basically 2 pots of money. We have fixed rate levies and fixed sum levies. Half of our revenues come from fixed sum levies, so that our revenues do not go up regardless of property values, right? And so it's just a lot more complicated than people think, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. I just wanted to clarify that so that the audience doesn't walk out confused. But Dan and I would be more than happy to meet with you, the 2 of you.
We appreciate it. Again, let's get the correct information on the table so we can have a positive conversation.
Yes, so we did look at the city's calculations when they tried to do the state foundation formula recalculations, and they were taking each year in isolation, and you can't do that, it doesn't work. And so we've been trying to set up a meeting to help educate them as well.
Okay. Thank you so much again. We appreciate it. And thank you for your patience. We knew it was a heavy agenda tonight, so we appreciate that.
We learned a lot.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Superintendent, do you have a report?
I do, thank you. I have 3 brief reports in addition to the written report, which includes the recommendations. So first, I would like to acknowledge Mary Alice Bauman. It is with great sadness that we announce that the transition of this retired educator, Mary Bauman, mother of Beverly Bauman Mallory, who is a current CPS employee. She passed away. Mrs. Bauman served CPS for over 35 years in various capacities, including teacher of a junior high math class, science, guidance counselor, vocational education coordinator, assistant principal at the junior high and senior high level, junior high principal, and grants administrator. She retired in 1990. However, she returned to CPS upon request to serve as a special education administrator. Mary Alice Bauman was the first African-American female to serve as a secondary principal for Cincinnati Public Schools.
Thank you.
Yes. My second report, which is on the screen, highlights, of course, our students. There we go. So I would like to announce that CPS sponsor an event to connect English language families, their learner families. We had over the summer over 70 school officials who attended the first session on an ongoing series to improve the lives of refugee families. And so you can see there are principals here that are represented along with our Honorable Marie Kobayashi. Participants in this session were AMI School, Aiken, Academy of World Languages, Dater High School, Midway, Mount Airy, Roberts, and Withrow. And this was sponsored by Xavier University. Vision 2020 is up and alive and well. We are in our last phase of the Vision 2020 schools so that all of our neighborhood schools will have a new program focused much like our magnet programs. So Midway and Hartwell, we're highlighting those 2 schools. Midway School has a focus on STEAM. And so you can see the little one with the drums there. And so this is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, as well as the arts. And Hartwell is working to build leaders of tomorrow through innovation, and they also have a focus on STEAM. Also very excited to announce that the state superintendent had an opportunity to visit Woodward a couple of weeks ago. And he actually asked to come to Cincinnati because he wanted to see a career tech courses in session. And so we had our board president there, as well as Melanie Bates, one of our board members, attended as well. And so we're very excited to be raised up as a leader as we look at career tech. Withrow turned 100.
Yeah.
And it was quite a celebration. And so they celebrated for an entire week. You can see some of the Withrow alum on Fountain Square. They had an orange out day, and the fountain turned orange. It was very festive. They had a wonderful gala. What was really inspiring about the gala is that you had a wide range of alumni there. And so Emily Spicer was there as the alum who is the most veteran. So she graduated 75 years ago. So it was quite amazing. There was a large variety of not only age, but also race. And so it was really great to see all the people come together. And then my last report as it relates to students is to highlight West Side Schools Unite during Westwood Days. And so you see Midway, Dater, Gamble Elementary, as well as Gamble High School all represented. They continue this celebration to really highlight all the good things that are happening on the west side of town, specifically in the Westwood area. My final report is just to point back to the board that I was asked to present to the board the Ohio recommendations for the report card from Cincinnati Public Schools. I did submit those to you. Just wanted to highlight a couple of areas that Cincinnati Public Schools has recommended in terms of changes for the Ohio State Report Card. One is the inclusion of a letter from the superintendent that identifies and depicts stories about the good work that's taking place within the district. These things would highlight initiatives as well as interventions, growth, parent involvement, and all of the rich things that we have going on, whether we're talking about Vision 2020 or My Tomorrow. In addition, one of our recommendations focused on displaying the report card by grade bands, so K-8, 9, 12, and then being able to separate the performance index scores. Again, I'm just going to make some of the highlights as it relates to our recommendations, and these were submitted 2 years ago to Mike Duffy, who was leading the charge in report card reform. We also believe that within the state report card for each district, there should be a school and a district profile so that people get an idea and a sense of the contextual complexity of our schools as well as the richness of our schools. We were interested in looking at removing the letter grades, but instead replacing it with a 4-point scale. And so we believe that the letter grades don't necessarily depict what's happening in a school on a continuum in terms of success. And so we believe that a 4-point scale would be able to highlight those areas better. Finally, I'll highlight just a couple of more. One is to really focus our academic achievement in terms of a fraction as opposed to a percentage, because people a lot of times get really lost with percentages, but fractions people understand pretty easily. And so we believe that that might help our constituents, our families understand the state report card as well. We highlighted, of course, with the board's initiative and work and resolution around equity, that equity be highlighted as opposed to a gap. Gap really gives the connotation of something that is very negative and from a deficit base, and we believe that equity really highlights strengths. And so I'll just refer you back to, it's about a 4-page document that I sent as a memo maybe a week and a half ago that highlights our recommendations as it relates to the state report card. And that concludes my report in addition to the written report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Do I have a motion to approve the revised recommendations of the superintendent?
So moved.
Second?
Second, any discussion? Questions, comments? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates.
Aye.
Ms. Bolton.
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers.
Aye.
Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Messer.
Aye.
President Jones.
Aye, sorry.
Aye. Thank you, motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve the report of the treasurer?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second?
Discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Bolton.
On the treasurer's report, it's just for my own clarification, it's under I think, yes. It deals with the school department talent development. It's Lopez Studio Group, and the purpose is to project planning and designing of district spaces that reflect CPS culture and brand, Phase 2. This is the second phase of a three-phase project. Is there somebody that can explain that to me?
Yes, I'll ask Susan Bunty to come forward. As she's coming forward, this is to really look at all the space that we have at central office and how we might better align departments to the work that is now being asked of us as it relates to, quite honestly, the three-year direction. And so as we continue to expand our school complement and our employee complement at central office, we believe that a new configuration in terms of space would be important.
Yes, I couldn't have said that better myself. So Lupe is taking a look with us, in addition to our facilities department, how we can better use the space that we have, including adjacencies, which departments should be next to other departments, how we're paying attention to the way that we provide an employee experience here in this building for all of the people who work within it.
Thank you. I think it's a good idea, and I know that we're probably doing that to a certain extent throughout the district, even looking at our schools, trying to figure out how best to redesign without necessarily remodeling too much okay, that's great. I think it's very needed. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates.
Aye.
Ms. Bolton.
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers.
Aye.
Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Messer.
Aye.
President Jones.
Aye. Thank you. Motion carries. All right, so we're at inquiries and updates. Mr. Hoyne, if we can get an update on the status of the tax abatement negotiations with the city.
Thank you, yes. So at your direction, the treasurer and I have been contacting the city to restart our discussions regarding the negotiation of an abatement agreement. We have been offered dates on October 3rd and 4th. We've accepted those dates and said we will be available to meet, but urged the city to provide dates earlier than that, dates in September. We've not gotten a response from the city to our request for that.
Okay. Okay. Is that it? Anybody have questions or comments for Mr. Hoyne? Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, reflecting on a memo that I think you sent to us about the development of a proposal based upon the board's resolution. I think that board may need to discuss that or see what that proposal would look like. That would be great. So if that might be an assignment at the end of this, that you continue working on it, and then that we see what it might look like. Because I'm not one of these people that, thinks this is a dog and pony show. This is negotiations, and whoever takes the first effort at it, deserves some credit.
Of course.
Thank you.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you for that update. I believe Ms. Brooks is going to update us, and this goes back, I just wanted to remind folks that if you remember the collaborative meeting that we had, and there were several tasks that came out of that meeting, and the board members kept wanting information about the next steps and what was going on. So Ms. Brooks is going to share with us an update on that.
So it's a very quick update. Thank you, Ms. Warren. This one. This one. This one. Okay. So to begin with, at your desk, you should have a paper which is a draft of points of communication. This is something that the Cincinnati Preschool Promise Interim Director and I began in August, and we continue to add to it. And we looked at different points, touch points, such as board-to-board, leadership, the program, and then also the finance. And it tells you who are the collaborators, the purpose, and then how many times or how often they meet. So that was one area. I know Mr. Messer has been meeting with one of the CPP board members to collaborate and come together for the RACI document that we are excited to see rolled out soon, hopefully. I also know Superintendent Mitchell has done an awesome job, as it was requested, in meeting with the interim executive director of CPP and phone conferencing, and then also invited me to join them twice as we continue to move forward on some of the things that were discussed at the joint board meeting. So that is one area. Also, we wish to celebrate, so we will start beginning to develop, hopefully, a fall harvest celebration for our providers in Preschool Promise. And I know Ms. Worley's team will probably be a big asset to help us to begin delivering that. The other is, the date is set for the CPP CPS joint board meeting. It will be October 10th from 6 to 8 p.m. We are still waiting for the location to be determined by Preschool Promise Board. They wish to host, which we appreciate. They are just deciding between two locations, so it could also be live streamed per your all's request. And that's the update I have. Is there any questions?
Thank you. I just wanted to add to, just so people know, that Father Graham and I talk on a regular basis. And there was a recommendation just in terms of the partnership meeting. It was proposed that we meet 3 times a year. So I think, just so folks know, to anticipate that that will happen 3 times. And they are trying to, at the request of this board, I think the meeting time, they're trying to find a location that can do the live stream.
Yes.
Which is what okay.
Yes,
Thank
they
you.
are looking. They stated they'd probably have a decision on that, Father Graham said, by the end of this week or beginning of next.
Okay.
So we're hoping. And then also I provided you all with our new parent-friendly handbook.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, Father Graham will be calling me. We will be working on the agenda item, so we'll get back to the boards with sort of projected agenda topics as soon as they finalize the location and what have you. Okay. Introduction of resolution regarding Vision Zero. Ms. Bates.
Yes, you have in your packets a resolution regarding Vision Zero, and I'll kind of give a little bit of a background as how this came about, at least the organization of this and the presentation of this evening. First of all, for those in the audience, if a resolution or policy has not come out of committee, it is required to be, by our board protocol, to be introduced and then lay over until the next business meeting for a vote. So that is the purpose of introducing this resolution. That being said, this is a pretty broad resolution, and it's a starting point for us to work on it before the vote. And I'm sure that Eve will agree that she and I will volunteer to work on this coming week with your input as you read the resolution. I know I have input that I want to include as well, but again, this is a starting point. This came about because of the crisis situation on our streets, and to date, we've had 6 children hit by cars since the beginning of the school year. Last year, we had more and 1 death, and as a matter of fact, the Rodriguez family is very involved in the effort to make our streets safer. That's the legacy they want to have for their daughter, Gabby, who was unfortunately a fatality last year, one of our students. So the basis of this is that instead of, the school board doing something and the city doing something else, and then the police working on enforcement and, council working on another approach, that we all get together and work in one direction. And actually, this is a topic that we're getting a ton of buy-in from, an agreement that we absolutely can work with the city, with law enforcement, with the neighborhoods, with our schools, with our union, on making sure that we come together on a way to bring about safe streets and change the culture of our city regarding the way we transport or we drive. Right now, it's, as we all know, kind of, a free-for-all out there on our streets. So, as President Sellers said before, and Eve and I have met with President Sellers and Derek Bauman, who is spearheading this at the city level, that we really do need a coordinated campaign to raise awareness. I mean, of course, the police are going to be in charge of enforcement, and the police and Greg Landsman, one of our council members, have a plan to move in that direction. But we certainly can raise awareness. We have, families that are really desperate to have safety and their children safe on our streets. We have teachers, as we've heard today. 2 teachers came, and they are very interested in being very active to have safe streets. So a campaign with the board leading the way certainly is in order, and we could talk about that further, but a good start would be to join the rest districts across the country and cities across the country on October the 2nd for Walk to School Day. This is a national movement. We're not the only ones in this country that are having these problems, and have kind of I guess you would call it a peaceful demonstration in front of our schools at whatever times the schools felt appropriate, before school, after school, get community members out with signs, maybe have the kids make the signs to start an awareness campaign, and then plan for events, subsequent events that we can continue to raise awareness for safety around our schools. But back to the resolution, for the board to become intricately involved and to show our leadership. And yes, we're going to join with the city, and City Council has already adopted Vision 2020 that we adopted as a school board. So if the board would like a presentation prior to the meeting that we will vote this up or down, I am very happy to arrange that for you. I'm not sure if that's no? Everybody knows what Vision Zero is? Okay, so we know that. So what I am proposing is that the board review this. Eve and I will work on the resolution with your input. You can email us. You could join us if you would like to join an ad hoc work session that Eve and I will have. Any way the board would like to participate to move this forward. I'm open to your suggestions and input.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Bolton.
I appreciate Ms. Bates's leadership on this, and yes, the CFT has been very involved, and also, as some of you know, we have a student advisory group as well, with a few high school students and mostly elementary students, all of them from the west side, except one of them now is a 7th grader at Walnut, so that counts as east side. And so there's a lot of interest, and there has to be. But I want to just give a little bit more context to this. We have been on this topic for quite some time as a board. Actually, boards previous have been on this topic. You'll recall that when we had the request about a sidewalk over by Mount Washington or so, we were informed by the State Department of Transportation and the City of Cincinnati that we had to update our safe routes to school to actually be able, which we were the first district to do a district-wide one back in 2013. So we've been leaders on this. So I know that as a board we talked in the last 2 months or so, as well as on the SAC committee, if I recall, the idea of going back, creating that safety committee if necessary, but it seems that's generically happened, but that the purpose would be to create another district-wide safe routes to school effort, much as we did years ago, and that can be part of our strategic plan piece, especially from a standpoint of the utmost importance is the health of our children and the safety of our children. In light of that, this proposed initial resolution that I'm sure will be drafted and redrafted along the way, it would, I think, behoove us to probably try, with the partnering of the Vision Zero folks, there's an entire document in publication that puts Vision Zero in with the Safe Routes movement. So I think that one of the things that will be recommended along the way, and I hope in this resolution, will be blending those two things together, since we've already decided a bit about the safe routes. Another piece is to think in terms of anybody has any ideas about what they wouldn't want to be in here or that they would want to be in here. I think it would be great to be able to communicate that to Ms. Bates or to me. But I would also say that we have at least how many other villages, cities, and townships that have to be our partners in this safety piece too. So the strongest partnership and the biggest partnership has to be between us and the city of Cincinnati, but we can't forget the several townships and the villages and the other cities that also have to be a part of this, as well as the community's interest in returning to having almost the walking school bus, the safe routes to school, what have you. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to bring a lot of people together. So if anybody has ideas about the resolution, that would be great to share.
Okay, so we can anticipate a resolution being on the next board agenda for this. And if you have feedback or questions, please direct those to Ms. Bates or Ms. Bolton.
Yeah, and I would add, don't be, I know you won't be, but don't feel like everything that's in it has to stay. I know there's some concern about us telling the superintendent how to do a job description for the transportation leader. I mean, I don't think, we might feel that's not within our purview, but indeed other things might be. And I wouldn't hesitate, too, to ask the administration to look at the resolution, which I'm sure they will, and give some suggestions so that we can come back. I had lunch today with a former board member who is very involved with this, with the city council folks, and there is some belief that there's going to ultimately be a mutual resolution between the city and the board, eventually passing the same thing, at least broadly.
Okay, thank you. All righty, so we're going to move on to assignments. Mr. Messer?
Yes, as it relates to the tax 99 agreement negotiations, and I just want to make an assignment for the administration to look into the deal where we're, as a community, beholden again to sports teams and about to buy some land for them and then displace a concrete company and put it in the backyard of one of our schools so they can enjoy the waste and everything else, and at the same time, shield them from paying taxes to support our children. So if you could look into the deal that's about to take place down at the river, at least they're working on it. Granted, they've not been very transparent in the amounts and essential information that one would think would be appropriate for public entities, but I think we need to explore that deal and craft what they're trying to do, because we will see that there is one big loser in there, and that's our children. So as we go to the city in this 99 agreement, we have to ensure that we're calling out specific examples like this where we aren't going to be made whole, and we will continue to lose because they play outside of the boundaries. So if we could include that into an assessment and then ultimately to the conversations, I think that would be prudent.
Thank you. Any other assignments? Yes, Ms. Bolton.
Just to piggyback on the Vice President's suggestion and assignment, I would like, since we have experts, I would like to be able to see from the administration the safety and health risks for our students regarding that move or the proposed move of the Hilltop Cement Company. Because I think that if we have folks, even within our own district, I think we could be able to talk in terms of air quality and pollution and what have you. I know we've also planned around there being a park that one of our great partners has proposed, and that's not happened. And so I just think it would be great if you could come back and make sure that we know what those health risks might be.
Okay, thank you. Any other assignments? Okay, having no other business before us, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.